Griffin Maddox, the ruthless CEO known as the Storm King, has built an empire through fear and fury, using his rage to mask the devastating grief over his brother's death. When single mother Zariah Miles arrives as his new housekeeper with a perceptive 6-year-old daughter Lena, she's just trying to escape an abusive past and build a safe life for them both. But when little Lena discovers Griffin crying alone in his library and gently wipes away his tears, everything changes. This simple act of compassion from a child who has known too much pain becomes the catalyst for healing two broken souls and creating an unexpected family. Before we start this story, comment below from where you're watching us. Griffin Maddox slammed his office door so hard the glass rattled. Another board meeting, another day of making grown men squirm in their expensive suits. At 34, he was the youngest CEO in the company's history and the most feared. "Mr. Maddox, your 3 o'clock appointment is here." His assistant's nervous voice came through the intercom. "Cancel it," Griffin barked. "Cancel everything for the rest of the day." He loosened his tie and poured himself a generous glass of whiskey from the crystal decanter on his desk. The business magazine on his desk featured his own scowling face on the cover with the headline, "The Storm King: How Griffin Maddox Built an Empire Through Fear." Griffin took a long drink and stared at the picture of himself. What the magazine didn't show was the truth, that just 4 months ago, his younger brother Wyatt had died of an overdose after years of struggling to get clean. His phone buzzed with a text message from his PR team. "Need statement firing of Johnson & Associates by end of day." Griffin threw the phone across the room. That was the 3rd PR firm he'd fired this year alone. He didn't need them telling him how to run his business or his life. He didn't need anyone. The large house felt empty when Griffin arrived home that evening. The staff knew better than to bother him. He headed straight for his private library, his sanctuary in the sprawling mansion he'd built but never filled with family. "Sir," his house manager Henderson approached cautiously. The new housekeeper arrived today with her daughter. They're settled in the East Wing staff quarters. "Fine," Griffin muttered, not really listening. "Whatever. She'll begin her duties tomorrow morning. Her references are excellent. I don't care about the help, Henderson. Just make sure they stay out of my way." Henderson nodded and quietly backed away, used to his employer's moods. What he didn't tell Griffin was that he'd been desperate to fill the position after the last 3 housekeepers had quit, unable to tolerate Griffin's outbursts. In the small but comfortable staff quarters, Zariah Miles unpacked the few belongings she and her daughter had brought to their new home. At 30, Zariah had learned that starting over was sometimes the only way forward. "Do you like our new room, Lena?" she asked her 6-year-old daughter, who was quietly arranging her small collection of books on a shelf. Lena nodded but didn't speak. She hadn't said much since they'd left their old apartment 3 months ago, leaving behind the life they'd shared with Lena's father, Marcus. "The house is very big," Zariah continued, trying to make conversation with her unusually quiet child. "Mr. Henderson seems nice, and the job pays well. We're going to be okay here." What Zariah didn't say was how desperate she'd been for this position. After escaping her relationship with Marcus, who had slowly drained her confidence through years of emotional manipulation, she needed stability. This job offered good pay and housing, rare for a single mother with no college degree. "Mr. Maddox might seem a little scary," she warned Lena as she helped her get ready for bed. "But Henderson says he's rarely home, and when he is, he stays in his office or library. We probably won't see him much." Lena looked up at her mother with those serious brown eyes that always seemed to see more than a 6-year-old should. "Does he mean like Daddy was?" she asked softly. Zariah's heart clenched. "No, baby. He's just busy and important. And we're going to be invisible, remember? That's our superpower." Lena nodded, understanding the game they played. Being invisible meant being safe. It meant not causing trouble. It meant keeping their new home. The next morning, Zariah began her duties, learning the routines of the massive house from Mrs. Collins, the cook who had somehow managed to survive Griffin's temper for 3 years. "He likes his coffee black, breakfast at exactly 7:15, and don't ever enter his library without knocking," Mrs. Collins explained. "And for heaven's sake, keep your little one away from him. The man has no patience for children." Zariah nodded, determined to excel at her job and remain invisible. She had arranged for Lena to attend the local elementary school, and after school, she would stay in their quarters with books and quiet activities. For 2 weeks, the plan worked perfectly. Zariah cleaned the mansion with precision and care. She glimpsed Griffin only from a distance, his tall figure storming through the house, barking orders into his phone, slamming doors. She made sure to be in a different part of the house whenever he was home. Then came the rainy Thursday that changed everything. School had been canceled due to a power outage, and Lena was quietly coloring in their quarters when Zariah realized she needed to clean the East Wing bathrooms before Griffin returned from work. "Lena, I need to finish my work upstairs. Can you stay here and read your books for an hour?" "I'll be quick," Lena nodded, reaching for her favorite picture book. "Remember our rule? Stay in our rooms unless there's an emergency." "I remember, Mommy," Lena whispered. Zariah hurried to complete her tasks, not knowing that at that very moment, Griffin had returned early from work, in a worse mood than usual. His company's stock had dropped after a failed merger. The board was questioning his leadership, and a reporter had ambushed him with questions about his brother. Griffin stormed into his library and slammed the door, loosening his tie with shaking hands. The weight of the past 4 months crashed down on him like a physical force. Wyatt's face flashed in his mind, not the hollow-eyed addict of the final years, but the bright-eyed kid who had followed Griffin everywhere, who had believed his big brother could fix anything. "Damn it, Wyatt," Griffin whispered, his voice breaking. "Why couldn't you just stay clean?" For the first time since the funeral he hadn't allowed himself to cry at, Griffin felt tears burning in his eyes. He pressed his fists against his desk, shoulders shaking with the effort to contain the grief he'd been channeling into rage for months. He didn't hear the library door open slightly, didn't notice the small figure who slipped into the room, didn't realize he wasn't alone until he felt something soft touch his cheek. Griffin froze. Standing beside him was a small girl with serious eyes, her hand extended, the sleeve of her sweater pulled over her small fingers as she gently wiped a tear from his face. For a long moment, they stared at each other in silence. The powerful CEO and the silent child. Then, without a word, the little girl turned and walked out of the library, closing the door softly behind her. Griffin remained frozen, his hand touching his cheek where her sleeve had brushed away his tear. Something inside him cracked open, not wide, just a hairline fracture in the wall he'd built around his grief. Upstairs, Zariah finished cleaning the last bathroom and hurried back to their quarters, anxiety rising when she found the room empty. "Lena," she called, trying to keep her voice calm. "Lena, where are you?" She searched their small suite, panic mounting with each empty room. She had just turned to rush into the hallway when the door opened and Lena walked in, her face as solemn as ever. "Lena, where were you? You know you're supposed to stay here." Zariah knelt down, her relief quickly turning to fear. If Mr. Maddox had seen her wandering around. "I heard someone crying," Lena said simply. "He was sad like you were when we left, Daddy." Zariah felt her blood run cold. "Who was crying, baby?" "The man with the angry face. He was in the room with all the books." "Mr. Maddox?" Zariah whispered, horror filling her. "You went into Mr. Maddox's library?" Lena nodded. "He needed a tissue, but I didn't have one, so I used my sleeve." Zariah felt lightheaded. In 2 weeks, she managed to keep herself and Lena completely off Griffin Maddox's radar. Now her daughter had not only entered his private sanctuary without permission, but had witnessed him in what must have been a vulnerable moment. "What did he say to you?" she asked, already mentally packing their bags. "Nothing. I didn't talk to him. He looked scared." Griffin Maddox scared? The man who made Fortune 500 executives tremble? "Lena, listen to me," Zariah said firmly. "You must never, ever go into Mr. Maddox's rooms again. Do you understand? We could lose our home." Before Lena could respond, there was a sharp knock at their door. Zariah stood on shaky legs and opened it to find Henderson, his face grave. "Ms. Miles, Mr. Maddox would like to see you in his office." Immediately, Zariah's heart sank. This was it. They were going to be fired, thrown out with nowhere to go. all because Lena had tried to comfort a crying man. "Of course," she said, smoothing her uniform with trembling hands. "Lena, stay here. I'll be back soon." The walk to Griffin's office felt like a march to the executioner. Zariah tried to think of what to say, how to apologize, how to beg for her job, if necessary. She couldn't afford to lose this position. Henderson opened the office door for her and then discreetly disappeared. Griffin Maddox stood with his back to her, staring out the window at the rain-soaked garden. He'd changed from his business suit into a casual sweater and jeans, but his posture was still rigid with tension. "Mr. Maddox, I am so sorry about my daughter," Zariah began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I promise it won't happen again. She knows she made a mistake entering your library without permission." Griffin turned slowly. His face was composed, but his eyes were different somehow. Less cold, less certain. "Your daughter," he said, his voice unexpectedly quiet. "What's her name?" "Lena, sir. She's 6. Griffin nodded slowly. "She doesn't talk much, does she?" "No, sir. Not since." Zariah hesitated. "Not for some time now." Griffin walked to his desk and sat down, gesturing for Zariah to take the chair opposite him. She perched nervously on the edge of the seat. "She came into my library today," he said. "Yes, sir. I'm truly sorry, Dash." He held up a hand to stop her apology. "She saw me." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "In a private moment." Zariah nodded, eyes downcast. "I understand if you want us to leave." Griffin looked genuinely surprised. "Leave? No, that's not." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that made him look younger, less intimidating. "I'm not firing you, Ms. Miles." Relief flooded through Zariah, followed quickly by confusion. Based on everything she'd heard about Griffin Maddox, she had expected rage, not this strange, subdued conversation. "I wanted to ask you about her," Griffin continued. "About Lena." "Sir." "She saw me." He paused again, and Zariah realized with shock that the fearsome CEO was struggling to admit he'd been crying. "She saw me and didn't run away. Didn't look afraid." "What?" The question caught Zariah off guard. How could she explain Lena's extraordinary empathy, her ability to see through people's defenses? "Lena has always been sensitive to others' feelings," she said carefully. "Too sensitive sometimes. If she saw you were upset, she would want to help. It's just her nature." Griffin seemed to absorb this information, his brow furrowed in thought. "Does she like books?" he asked abruptly. "Yes," Zariah replied, confused by the question. "She loves them. She's already reading at a 3rd grade level." Something flickered in Griffin's expression, a shadow of pain, quickly hidden. "My brother loved books," he said quietly, more to himself than to Zariah. Then, as if remembering himself, his face hardened back into its usual mask. "That will be all, Ms. Miles. You may go." Zariah stood, still bewildered by the strange conversation. She was at the door when Griffin spoke again. "Ms. Miles." She turned back. "Yes, Mr. Maddox. Your daughter can use the library. The small one on the 2nd floor, not my private one. If she wants to borrow books." His voice was gruff, as if the offer embarrassed him. "Thank you, sir. That's very kind." "It's not kind," he snapped, a flash of the infamous temper returning. "It's practical. Books should be read, not collect dust." Zariah nodded and quickly left the office, her mind racing. What had just happened? Griffin Maddox, the man known for firing people for bringing him the wrong type of coffee, had not only kept them on, but offered his books to Lena. Back in their quarters, she found Lena sitting exactly where she'd left her, a picture book open on her lap. "Are we in trouble, Mommy?" Lena asked, her small face serious. Zariah sat beside her daughter, pulling her close. "No, baby, we're not in trouble. But remember our rule about staying where you're supposed to be?" Lena nodded solemnly. "I am sorry." But he was so sad, like the sky was falling inside him. Out of the mouths of babes, Zariah thought. What had made the fearsome Griffin Maddox cry alone in his library? And why did she suddenly feel like something important had shifted in their carefully ordered world? As if in answer to her unspoken question, there was another knock at their door. Henderson stood there holding a stack of children's books. "Mr. Maddox thought Miss Lena might enjoy these," he said, his expression betraying his own surprise at the gesture. They belonged to his younger brother. Zariah accepted the books with murmured thanks, closing the door behind Henderson and staring at the stack in her arms. These weren't just any books. They were clearly cherished, some with worn covers and dog-eared pages. "Pretty," Lena said, reaching for the top book. "Yes," Zariah agreed, still bewildered by this unexpected turn of events. "Very pretty." As Lena settled on the floor with her new treasure, Zariah wondered what tomorrow would bring. For the first time since arriving at the Maddox estate, she felt visible, and she wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. The morning after Lena's encounter with Griffin in the library, Zariah noticed subtle changes in the mansion. Henderson informed her that Mr. Maddox had requested breakfast be served at 7:30 instead of 7:15, which meant Zariah could see Lena off to school before starting her morning duties. "He specifically mentioned it was so you wouldn't have to rush with your daughter," Henderson said, unable to hide his surprise. Zariah didn't know what to make of this. In her experience, men didn't make thoughtful gestures without expecting something in return. Her ex, Marcus, had been a master at using small kindnesses to make her feel indebted to him. Over the next week, Griffin's presence in the house changed. He still worked long hours and often came home tense and irritable, but the explosive outbursts diminished. Once, Zariah overheard him speaking on the phone in a controlled voice rather than shouting, even though she could tell from his words that he was firing someone. "The staff is whispering about you," Mrs. Collins told Zariah as they prepared lunch one day. "They say your little girl has cast some kind of spell on the boss." "That's ridiculous," Zariah replied, uncomfortable with the attention. "Mr. Maddox is probably just busy with work." "Honey, I've worked for that man for 3 years. I know when something's different, and something is definitely different." The most noticeable change came when Zariah found a small package outside their quarters one evening. It contained a set of high-quality colored pencils and a sketchbook with a note in bold handwriting. "For Lena. I noticed she likes to draw." There was no signature, but could only have come from Griffin. Zariah stared at the gift, unsure what to make of it. The pencils were expensive, the kind professional artists used. "Are those for me?" Lena asked, peering over her mother's shoulder. "Yes, for Mr. Maddox," Zariah replied cautiously. Lena's face lit up, one of her rare smiles brightening her solemn features. "He saw my drawing in the book." "What drawing?" "I put a picture in one of the books he gave me, of him and the man in the photo on his desk." Zariah felt a chill. Lena must have drawn Griffin and his brother, though how she knew they were brothers, Zariah couldn't guess. Sometimes Lena's perceptiveness unnerved even her. "Lena, we don't look at Mr. Maddox's private things," she admonished gently. "The picture was right there," Lena said simply. "They have the same eyes." That night, after Lena was asleep, Zariah made a decision. These gifts, the sudden interest in her daughter, it was too much, too confusing. She needed to establish boundaries before things got complicated. The next morning, she knocked on Griffin's office door, her heart pounding. "Come in," his voice called. Griffin sat behind his massive desk, looking tired but composed. The office was immaculate except for a child's drawing propped against his computer. Lena's drawing, Zariah realized with a jolt. "Ms. Miles," Griffin said, straightening in his chair. "Is everything all right with your quarters?" "Yes, Mr. Maddox. Everything is fine." Zariah took a deep breath. "I came to thank you for the art supplies for Lena. That was very generous." Griffin nodded, a hint of awkwardness in his expression. "She's talented. The drawing she left, it's good." "About that," Zariah said carefully, "I think we need to discuss some boundaries." Griffin's eyebrows rose. "Boundaries? Yes, sir. I appreciate your kindness toward Lena, but I'm concerned about her becoming too attached. We're staff here, and I'm the boss," Griffin finished, his voice cooling. "Is that it?" "Partly," Zariah admitted. "But also, Lena has been through a lot. Her father, he wasn't a good man. He made promises he never kept. I don't want her to be disappointed again." Something flickered in Griffin's eyes, not anger but understanding. He was silent for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made Zariah uncomfortable. "My brother died 4 months ago," he said abruptly, An overdose. The statement was so unexpected that Zariah couldn't hide her surprise. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Maddox. Wyatt struggled with addiction for years. I tried everything, the best rehab centers, private counselors, tough love, soft love. Griffin's mouth twisted. Nothing worked. He'd get clean, then relapse. Over and over. Zariah remained silent, sensing he needed to speak more than he needed a response. The last time I saw him, I lost my temper. Told him I was done bailing him out. Griffin's voice roughened. 2 days later, he was gone. The pain in his voice was raw, undisguised. Zariah realized she was seeing beneath the armor that Griffin Maddox showed to the world. That's what your daughter saw. Griffin continued quietly. Not just a man crying, a man drowning in guilt. Zariah's carefully prepared speech about boundaries evaporated. This wasn't what she had expected. This vulnerability, this honesty. I understand your concerns, Griffin said, his composure returning. I'm not trying to overstep. But your daughter, she did something no one else has done. She saw me at my worst and showed kindness anyway. He stood and walked to the window, his back to Zariah. I don't know how to explain it, but that moment changed something for me. Zariah, he thought of Lena's words, like the sky was falling inside him. Her daughter had seen what no one else had, the grief beneath the rage. Mr. Maddox, she began, then hesitated. Griffin, I'm not saying you can't be kind to Lena. I just need to know your intentions. He turned, genuine confusion on his face. Intentions? I don't have any intentions, Ms. Miles. I'm not planning anything. He seemed to struggle for words. I just feel more human around her. Around both of you. The sincerity in his voice was impossible to doubt. Zariah felt her defenses weakening, even as her caution remained. All right, she said finally. But please understand, Lena's well-being is everything to me. As it should be, Griffin replied. You're a good mother. The simple compliment caught her off guard. Marcus had constantly criticized her parenting, making her doubt herself at every turn. To hear this confident assertion from Griffin, it was unexpectedly moving. Thank you, she said softly. I try to be. An awkward silence fell between them, neither sure what to say next. I should get back to work, Zariah said finally, turning toward the door. Ms. Miles, Griffin called as her hand touched the doorknob. Zariah. She turned back, startled by his use of her first name. Thank you, he said simply, for hearing me out. After that conversation, something shifted between them. Griffin began to ask Zariah quiet questions about Lena whenever they crossed paths, about her school, her interests, her continued silence around most people. She wasn't always so quiet, Zariah explained one evening as she tidied Griffin's office while he worked. It started after things got bad with her father. What happened? Griffin asked, his voice careful, neutral. Zariah hesitated. She rarely spoke about Marcus, but something about Griffin's attentive silence made her want to explain. He never hit us, she began. That's what makes it hard to explain to people. But he would twist things, make me doubt myself, make me feel crazy for questioning him. Griffin nodded, his face grim. Emotional abuse. Yes, but so subtle at first. He'd tell me I looked tired in front of people, then privately suggest I wasn't taking good care of myself. He'd move things in the house, then act concerned when I couldn't find them. Little things that added up over time. And Lena? He ignored her mostly, unless he needed to use her to hurt me. Zariah's hands tightened on the stack of papers she was organizing. He'd tell her I was too busy for her, or that mommy didn't want to play because she was angry. Griffin's expression darkened. That's cruel. It was. But the worst part was watching Lena try to make herself smaller, quieter, to avoid his notice. Zariah blinked back, unexpected tears. That's why she notices everything now. She learned to read moods, to anticipate what might make someone upset. That's why she came to me in the library, Griffin realized. She recognized pain. Yes, and she wants to fix it. Like she always tried to fix things between me and Marcus. Griffin was quiet for a long moment. How did you leave him? It wasn't dramatic. One day I just saw myself through Lena's eyes, this scared, shrinking woman who jumped at shadows. And I thought, is this what I want my daughter to become? Zariah shook her head. We left that night. I told him we were going to visit my mother and just never went back. That took courage, Griffin said quietly. Zariah smiled sadly. It took desperation, and it hasn't been easy. He's tried to find us. That's why this job is so perfect. The staff housing, the security. He doesn't know where we are. Griffin nodded, his expression thoughtful. Thank you for telling me. I'm not sure why I did, Zariah admitted. I don't usually talk about it. Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who isn't directly involved, Griffin suggested. Someone who has no expectations. Their eyes met, and Zariah felt an unexpected connection. They were both broken in different ways, both guarded, both protecting painful pasts. The moment was interrupted by Henderson knocking to announce an urgent business call. Zariah slipped out of the office, but something had changed. A door had opened between them, not wide, but enough to let in a sliver of light. Over the next few weeks, Griffin's schedule shifted subtly. He began coming home earlier. Sometimes he would join Lena and Zariah in the small second-floor library, sitting quietly with his laptop while Lena drew or read. He never intruded or demanded attention, just occupied the same space with a gentleness that contradicted everything Zariah had heard about him. The staff noticed the changes. The shouting decreased. The drinking lessened. Once, Mrs. Collins dropped a tray of glasses outside Griffin's office, and instead of the expected explosion, he simply asked if she was hurt and called Henderson to help clean up. What have you done to him? Mrs. Collins whispered to Zariah afterward. It's like someone performed an exorcism. Zariah shook her head, uncomfortable with the implication that she had somehow tamed Griffin Maddox. The truth was more complicated. She wasn't changing him. She was simply witnessing his grief, finding a healthier outlet than rage. One rainy Sunday, Zariah's ancient car refused to start. She was supposed to take Lena to a doctor's appointment for her annual checkup, and panic rose as she realized they would miss it. Problem. Griffin's voice came from behind her as she stood helplessly in the garage, staring at the open hood. My car won't start, she explained, embarrassed. Lena has a doctor's appointment. Griffin checked his watch. I'll drive you. Oh no, that's not necessary, Dash. It's pouring rain. The next appointment might not be for weeks, and I'm heading into town anyway. Griffin said matter-of-factly. Let me help. 30 minutes later, Zariah found herself sitting in the passenger seat of Griffin's sleek black car. Lena buckled safely in the back seat. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that it felt surreal. Thank you for this, Zariah said as they drove through the rain-slicked streets. I can probably get a rideshare for the return trip. Don't be ridiculous, Griffin replied. I'll wait and drive you home. At the pediatrician's office, Zariah expected Griffin to wait in the car or go run his errands. Instead, he came inside, sitting quietly in the waiting room while Zariah took Lena in to see the doctor. When they emerged, Lena was proudly sporting a sparkly bandage where she'd received a vaccination. To Zariah's surprise, Griffin was still there, flipping through a well-worn copy of a children's magazine. All good? He asked, standing as they approached. Lena nodded and held up her arm to show off the bandage. Very impressive, Griffin said solemnly. Does it hurt? Lena shook her head. The doctor said I was brave. You are brave, Griffin agreed, and something in the way he said made Zariah think he wasn't just talking about the shot. As they left the clinic, Lena surprised both adults by slipping her small hand into Griffin's as they crossed the parking lot. Zariah watched his face register shock, then a careful, tender acceptance of the gesture. He adjusted his stride to match Lena's smaller steps, holding her hand as if it were made of glass. That evening, after Lena was asleep, Zariah found Griffin in the kitchen, making himself a sandwich. The sight of the powerful CEO doing such an ordinary task made her smile. Lena's asleep? He asked. Yes, the shot made her tired. Zariah hesitated, then added, Thank you again for today. You didn't have to do that. Griffin shrugged. It wasn't a big deal. It was to us. Zariah leaned against the counter. You're different than I expected, Griffin Maddox. He looked up, a hint of humor in his eyes. Disappointed? No, she said honestly. Surprised. My brother used to say there were two Griffins, the one in the boardroom and the real one. He cut his sandwich in half with precise movements. After he died, I think I lost track of which was which. And now, Griffin considered the question. Now I'm trying to remember who I was before I was so angry all the time. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and unguarded. Would you like some tea? Zariah found herself asking. I was about to make some. I'd like that, Griffin replied, and the simple domesticity of the moment felt both strange and right. They sat at the kitchen island, drinking tea and talking in low voices about nothing important. A movie Griffin had seen, a book Zariah was reading to Lena. It was an ordinary conversation between two people who were beginning to see each other as more than boss and employee. As Zariah stood to leave, Griffin said suddenly, I fire my assistant today. Oh, Zariah said, unsure how to respond. Was this a return to the old Griffin? He's been stealing information, selling it to competitors, Griffin explained. I found out last week. I am sorry. That must have been upsetting. The old me would have destroyed him, Griffin said matter-of-factly. Made sure he never worked in this industry again. And the new you? I fired him. Calmly. Told him why. Gave him 2 weeks severance and a neutral reference for non-competing industries. Griffin looked almost puzzled by his own actions. He cried. Thanked me for not ruining him. Zariah studied him. You're not sure if you did the right thing. I'm not sure if I did it because it was right or because... He trailed off. Because... Griffin met her eyes. Because I thought about what you would think of me if I'd gone scorched earth on him. What Lena would think if she could see the way I used to behave. The admission startled her. The idea that Griffin Maddox, feared CEO and business titan, cared about her opinion, about her daughter's opinion, was both flattering and terrifying. I'm not trying to be your conscience, Griffin, she said carefully. I know. That's what makes it work. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. I should let you get some rest. Zariah nodded and turned to go, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing, and I think your brother will be proud of you. Griffin's expression softened. Good night, Zariah. Good night, Griffin. As she walked back to her quarters, Zariah tried to make sense of her conflicting emotions. Griffin Maddox was not the man she had expected, not the monster the staff had whispered about, nor the charming predator she had feared. He was complicated, wounded, trying to find his way back from grief. And despite all her caution, all her determination to keep her distance, she was beginning to care about him. That realization should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like walking out of a dark room into unexpected sunlight, disorienting but warm. Back in their quarters, Zariah checked on Lena, who was sleeping peacefully. On her bedside table lay her latest drawing. 3 figures holding hands under a bright sun. A tall man, a woman, and a small child between them. A family. Zariah picked up the drawing, her throat tight with emotion. She had promised herself she would never again let a man into their lives, never risk Lena's heart or her own. Yet here they were, being drawn inexorably into Griffin Maddox's orbit. The question was no longer whether she could keep her distance, but whether she even wanted to. As if sensing her mother's presence, Lena stirred in her sleep. Mommy, she murmured drowsily. I'm here, baby, Zariah whispered, stroking her hair. Is Griffin going to be our family now? Lena asked, her voice blurred with sleep. The innocent question struck Zariah like a physical blow. It's complicated, sweetie. Go back to sleep. But long after Lena had drifted off again, Zariah sat in the darkness, thinking about her daughter's question and wondering what the answer might be. The changes in Griffin Maddox didn't go unnoticed in the business world. The trade magazines that had once nicknamed him the Storm King now ran articles speculating about his new management style and unexpected corporate compassion. His company's stock rose as employees reported improved workplace conditions and higher productivity. Have you seen this? Henderson asked one morning, showing Zariah a business magazine with Griffin's picture on the cover. The headline read, "The Tame Tempest. Has Griffin Maddox finally grown up?" I don't think he'd appreciate that headline, Zariah commented. uncomfortable with the idea that she and Lena might be credited with taming Griffin. The man she was coming to know wasn't tamed. He was healing. That evening, Griffin invited Zariah and Lena to join him for dinner in the main dining room rather than eating separately in their quarters as usual. It was the first time he'd made such a request, and Zariah found herself unexpectedly nervous as she helped Lena change into a clean dress. "Is this a special dinner?" Lena asked, watching her mother brush her hair. "I think Mr. Maddox just wants some company," Zariah replied carefully. "Griffin," Lena corrected. "He told me to call him Griffin, not Mr. Maddox." Zariah paused mid-brush. "When did he tell you that?" "When we were reading books yesterday. He said Mr. Maddox was his father, and his father wasn't very nice." Zariah wondered when Griffin and Lena had been reading together without her knowledge. The thought didn't alarm her as it once might have. She trusted Griffin with Lena now. But it was a reminder that their lives were becoming increasingly intertwined. The dining room was intimidatingly formal, with a massive table that could seat 20. But Griffin had arranged for them to eat at a smaller table near the fireplace, creating a more intimate setting. He stood when they entered, looking almost as nervous as Zariah felt. "Thank you for joining me," he said, pulling out chairs for both of them. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, his usual office attire abandoned. "Thank you for inviting us," Zariah replied, touched by his efforts to make them comfortable. "I helped pick the menu," Griffin told Lena with a conspiratorial smile. "Mrs. Collins said you like spaghetti." Lena's eyes widened. "With meatballs?" "Of course. What's spaghetti without meatballs?" The dinner was surprisingly relaxed. Griffin asked Lena about school and listened intently to her quiet answers. He told them funny stories about his early days starting his company, carefully edited to make a 6-year-old laugh. Zariah found herself laughing too, seeing a side of Griffin she'd only glimpsed before. "I have something to tell you both," Griffin said as they finished dessert, ice cream sundaes that Lena had decorated herself with sprinkles and chocolate sauce. Zariah tensed, years of experience with Marcus making her wary of announcements. "I've started a foundation," Griffin continued, "in my brother's name, for addiction treatment and support." "That's wonderful," Zariah said sincerely. Griffin nodded, his expression a mix of pride and sadness. Wyatt always wanted to help others fighting the same battles he was. This seems like the right way to honor him. "Will you tell people he was your brother?" Lena asked, perceptive as always. Griffin hesitated. "Yes. I've kept it private until now, but that ends tomorrow. I'm giving an interview to set the record straight." "That's brave," Zariah said softly. Griffin shrugged. "It's overdue. I've been hiding from the truth for too long, pretending I was angry at the world when really, I was just heartbroken." The simple admission hung in the air, powerful in its vulnerability. "Can I draw a picture for the foundation?" Lena asked, breaking the emotional moment. Griffin's face brightened. "I'd like that very much. Maybe we could hang it in the foundation office." Later, after Lena had been tucked into bed, Zariah found Griffin in the garden, staring up at the stars. She hesitated, then joined him on the stone bench. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "Lena had a wonderful time." "So did I." Griffin turned to look at her, his expression open and unguarded in the moonlight. "I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a meal that much." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the night air cool but pleasant. "I've been offered a promotion," Griffin said suddenly. "CEO of our European division, based in London." Zariah felt her heart sink. "That sounds like a great opportunity." "It is. More money, more prestige, a fresh start." Griffin's voice was flat, emotionless. "I was going to take it. Before Lena walked into my library that day." He turned to face her directly. "Before you both made me remember what matters." Zariah didn't know how to respond. The implication that she and Lena mattered to Griffin, that they had changed his life path, was overwhelming. "What will you do?" she asked finally. "I don't know yet." Griffin ran a hand through his hair. "Part of me thinks I should go, make a clean break. And the other part?" Griffin reached out slowly and took her hand. It was the first time he had touched her, and the contact sent a wave of warmth through Zariah's body. "The other part can't imagine not seeing you both every day," he said quietly. Can't imagine walking away from whatever this is becoming. Zariah looked down at their joined hands. Griffin, I'm not sure I'm ready for whatever this is becoming. I've made mistakes before. Trusted the wrong person. I know. His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. And I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just wanted you to know where I stand before I make any decisions. The honesty between them was new and fragile and precious. Zariah found herself wanting to lean into it, to trust this unexpected connection. I think Lena would miss you, she admitted. She's grown very attached. Just Lena? Griffin asked, a hint of humor in his voice. Zariah met his eyes. No, not just Lena. The admission cost her, but Griffin's smile was worth the risk. They sat together in the garden until the night air grew too cold, talking about small things and big dreams, comfortable in each other's company. The next morning, Griffin's interview hit the news. He spoke openly about Wyatt's struggle with addiction, about his own grief and anger, and about the foundation he was establishing. The business world was shocked by this new, vulnerable Griffin Maddox. The staff at the mansion were equally stunned. Did you know about his brother? Mrs. Collins asked Zariah as they prepared lunch. Yes, Zariah said simply, not elaborating on how or when she had learned the truth. And the foundation? Did you know about that too? Mrs. Collins, Zariah said firmly. Mr. Maddox's personal matters are his own. I don't think we should be gossiping about them. The older woman raised her eyebrows. Well, quite protective, aren't we? Zariah ignored the implication, but she couldn't deny to herself that she did feel protective of Griffin. He had exposed his most painful truth to the world, and she wanted to shield him from judgment or pity. That afternoon, Griffin came home early, looking drained but calm. He found Zariah in the library with Lena, who was working on a drawing for the foundation. How are you? Zariah asked softly. Tired, but good. Griffin sat beside Lena, who immediately showed him her work in progress. This is beautiful, Lena. Thank you. Is your brother in heaven? Lena asked, surprising both adults with a direct question. Griffin thought for a moment. I like to think so. He had a good heart, even when he made mistakes. My daddy made mistakes too, Lena said matter-of-factly. But he's not in heaven. He's in Chicago. Zariah felt her blood freeze. Lena, how do you know that? Lena looked confused by her mother's reaction. He called my school. The secretary told him I don't go there anymore. Griffin's face hardened with concern. When was this, Lena? Yesterday. Miss Wilson told me when you picked me up. Zariah stood shakily. Griffin, I need to speak with you. Privately. They stepped into the hallway, leaving Lena with her drawing. Marcus is looking for us, Zariah said, panic rising in her voice. If he called the school, he's getting close. Griffin's expression was grim. Has he done this before? Yes. It's why we've moved so many times. He always finds us eventually. Zariah pressed her hands to her face. I thought we were safe here. You are safe here, Griffin said firmly. This house has better security than most banks. But we need to alert the school not to give out any information about Lena. It's too late. If I told him she's not enrolled anymore, he'll know we've left Chicago. He'll start searching nearby cities. Zariah's voice trembled. We should leave. Find somewhere new. Zariah, stop. Griffin placed his hands on her shoulders, steadying her. Running isn't the answer. Not this time. You don't understand. Marcus is persistent, and he can be charming when he wants something. Understand perfectly, Griffin said, his voice low and intense. Men like Marcus count on fear. They count on their victims running, hiding, being isolated. But you're not alone anymore. The conviction in his voice penetrated Zariah's panic. She looked up at him, seeing determination in his eyes. What are you suggesting? Let me help you. We'll get a restraining order. I have lawyers who can make it happen quickly. We'll increase security at the house and at Lena's school. We'll face this problem head-on instead of letting him chase you from place to place. The idea of standing her ground instead of fleeing was terrifying and liberating. For years, Zariah had been running from Marcus, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the moment when they'd have to pack and disappear again. Do you really think it could work? She asked, hope and doubt warring in her heart. I know it can, Griffin said, but only if you want to fight. I won't force you to stay if you truly want to leave. Zariah thought of the life they'd begun to build here, of Lena's growing confidence, her attachment to Griffin, the stability they'd found, of her own feelings, fragile but real, for the man standing before her. I'm tired of running, she admitted, but I'm scared, Griffin. Not just for me, but for Lena. I understand. Griffin's hands moved from her shoulders to cup her face gently. But I promise you this. As long as I'm breathing, nothing will happen to either of you. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Zariah's heart ache. No one had ever made her feel so safe, so valued. Okay, she whispered. We'll stay. We'll fight. Relief flooded Griffin's face. Thank you for trusting me. Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her, softly, briefly, a question more than a demand. Zariah froze for an instant, then melted into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. When they broke apart, Griffin looked as surprised as she felt. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize, Zariah interrupted. I'm not sorry. A smile spread across his face, transforming his features from handsome to breathtaking. Neither am I, not even a little bit. The moment was interrupted by Lena calling from the library. Mommy? Griffin? Are you fighting? They stepped apart, both flushed. No, sweetie, Zariah called. We're just talking about grown-up things. Griffin took her hand and squeezed it reassuringly. We'll handle this. Together. Over the next few days, Griffin's resources were put into motion. His security team increased patrols around the property. His lawyers filed for an emergency restraining order based on Marcus's history of emotional abuse and stalking behavior. The school was notified not to release any information about Lena to anyone but Zariah or Griffin, who was added to her emergency contact list. Despite these precautions, Zariah remained tense, jumping at unexpected sounds and checking the locks obsessively. Griffin did his best to reassure her, staying close to home and making sure either he or his security team accompanied Zariah and Lena whenever they left the property. You can't put your life on hold for us forever, Zariah told him one evening as they sat in the garden after Lena was asleep. I'm not putting anything on hold, Griffin replied. I'm exactly where I want to be. What about London? The promotion? Griffin's expression grew serious. I turned it down. What? When? Yesterday. I told the board I need to finish what I've started here before I can consider moving on. He took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. And I wasn't just talking about the company. Zariah felt a surge of emotions, gratitude, affection, and a hint of guilt. I don't want you sacrificing opportunities because of us. It's not a sacrifice if it's what I truly want, Griffin said simply. And what I want is to be here, with you and Lena, building something real. The admission was the closest either of them had come to defining their relationship. Zariah leaned against his shoulder, allowing herself to believe, just for a moment, that they could have a future together. I've never been good at this, she confessed. At trusting, at letting someone in. Neither have I, Griffin admitted. My relationships before, they were superficial, convenient. I never let anyone see the real me. Not until you and Lena. Are we your girlfriend and daughter now? Zariah teased, trying to lighten the intensity of the moment. Griffin laughed softly. Is that what you want to be? Before Zariah could answer, her phone rang. The screen showed a number she didn't recognize, and a chill ran down her spine. Hello, she answered cautiously. Zariah. Marcus's voice was instantly recognizable, smooth, controlled, with the underlying current of menace she remembered all too well. Found you. Zariah's hand tightened around the phone. Griffin, noticing her expression, moved closer, his body tense with concern. What do you want, Marcus? Zariah asked, proud that her voice didn't shake. What do I want? I want to see my daughter, of course. Marcus's tone was reasonable, as if he were making a perfectly normal request. It's been, almost a year? That's a long time to keep a father from his child. You never cared about being a father before, Zariah replied. Why start now? People change, Z. I've changed. I've been in therapy, got a new job, a nice place. Lena would love it here. The familiar manipulation technique, showing a glimpse of a reformed character, dangling the promise of a better future, was so transparent now that Zariah almost laughed. "We have a restraining order against you," she said firmly. "If you come anywhere near us, you'll be arrested." There was a brief silence, then Marcus's voice hardened. "A restraining order? Really, Z? That's how you want to play this? It's not a game, Marcus. It's our lives." "Who's our? You got a new man already? Moving up in the world, living in some mansion." The veneer of reasonableness slipped, revealing the anger beneath. "What have you been telling Lena about me? Turning my own daughter against me? I don't have to tell her anything. She remembers what you were like. She's a child. She doesn't know what she remembers." Marcus's voice rose. "I have rights, Zariah. I'm her father. Biology doesn't make you a father," Zariah said, gaining confidence with each word. "Being there does. Caring does. Loving unconditionally does." Griffin's hand found hers, squeezing gently in support. "This isn't over," Marcus warned. "Not by a long shot. You can hide behind your rich boyfriend and your fancy lawyers, but I will see my daughter." "Goodbye, Marcus," Zariah said calmly, and hung up. She sat motionless for a moment, then looked at Griffin. "He knows where we are, or at least, he knows we're somewhere expensive." "A mansion," he said. Griffin's face was grim. "I'll have security do a sweep of the property and the perimeter. He won't get near you, Zariah. I promise." "He's not going to give up." Zariah closed her eyes briefly. "When Marcus wants something, he doesn't stop until he gets it. Neither do I," Griffin said simply. "And what I want is to keep you and Lena safe." That night, Zariah lay awake long after Lena had fallen asleep, replaying Marcus's words in her mind. The call had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Not because she feared Marcus physically, Griffin's security team was more than capable of handling that threat, but because she feared the emotional damage he could inflict on Lena if he managed to worm his way back into their lives. A soft knock at their door startled her. She opened it to find Griffin standing there, looking as sleepless as she felt. "I saw your light was still on," he said. "I was worried. I can't stop thinking about him, about what he might do." Griffin nodded in understanding. "May I come in? Just to talk." Zariah hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. They sat at the small table in the kitchenette area, far enough from Lena's bedroom that their voices wouldn't disturb her. "What if he tries to get custody?" Zariah whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "He's her biological father. The courts might. The courts will see a man with a history of emotional abuse who abandoned his child for nearly a year." Griffin interrupted gently. "My lawyers will make sure of that. But he's right about one thing. He does have rights, and he can be very convincing when he wants to be." Griffin reached across the table and took her hands. "Do you trust me, Zariah?" She met his eyes. "Yes." "Then trust that I will do everything in my power to protect you both. Not just with money or lawyers or security, but with whatever it takes." His voice was steady, certain. "I love Lena, and I love you." The declaration hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Zariah felt tears spring to her eyes. "Griffin, you don't have to say it back," he said quickly. "I know it's fast. I know you have every reason to be cautious. But I needed you to know where I stand. This isn't casual for me. It's everything." Zariah stood and moved around the table, drawn to him by a force she couldn't resist. Griffin rose to meet her, and when their lips met, it wasn't tentative like their first kiss. It was certain, passionate a promise. When they broke apart, Zariah rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered, "and it terrifies me." Griffin's arms tightened around her. "We'll be terrified together then." A small voice interrupted the moment. "Mommy?" "Griffin?" They turned to see Lena standing in her bedroom doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "It's okay, baby," Zariah said, moving toward her daughter. "Griffin just came to check on us." "Is my dad coming here?" Lena asked, her voice small but direct. Zariah exchanged a look with Griffin, then knelt in front of her daughter. "Lena, did you hear me talking on the phone earlier?" Lena nodded. "I wasn't spying. I was getting water." "It's okay," Zariah assured her. "Your dad called me. He says he wants to see you." "I don't want to see him," Lena said firmly. "He made you cry," Zariah pulled her daughter into a hug. You don't have to see him if you don't want to. Griffin is helping us make sure of that. Lena looked over her mother's shoulder at Griffin, who stood watching them with a mixture of love and protectiveness that made Zariah's heart ache. If I had a daddy like you, Lena said to Griffin, her voice clear in the quiet room, do you think he would have stayed? The innocent question struck both adults silent. Griffin moved closer and knelt beside them, his eyes suspiciously bright. Lena, he said gently, some people aren't ready to be parents. It has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. Your dad made mistakes, but they weren't because of anything you did or didn't do. Lena considered this, her small face serious. Are you going to stay? Griffin looked at Zariah, a question in his eyes. She gave a small nod, permission to answer honestly. Yes, Griffin said firmly. I'm going to stay for as long as you and your mom want me to. Lena seemed satisfied with this answer. She yawned widely, the late-night conversation catching up with her. Back to bed, sweetie, Zariah said, guiding her daughter back to her room. Everything's going to be okay. After tucking Lena in, Zariah returned to find Griffin still there, his expression thoughtful. She's remarkable, he said quietly. So perceptive. Too perceptive sometimes, Zariah agreed, leaning against him. She sees everything, including me, Griffin murmured, echoing his words from that first day when Lena had wiped his tears. When no one else did. They stood together in the quiet room, the future uncertain but no longer facing alone. Whatever Marcus might do, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them together. What neither of them knew was that at that very moment, Marcus was sitting in his car just outside the gates of the Maddox estate, watching, waiting, planning his next move. The peace they had found was more fragile than they realized, and the storm was far from over. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus's phone call, and while there had been no further contact, the tension remained. Griffin had increased security around the estate, adding cameras at the gates and hiring 2 additional guards. Zariah found herself checking over her shoulder whenever she took Lena to school, always alert for a familiar face in the crowd. Despite the shadow hanging over them, life at the Maddox estate settled into a new rhythm. Griffin spent less time at the office and more time with Zariah and Lena. They ate dinner together most evenings, helped Lena with her homework, and sometimes watched movies in the large media room that had rarely been used before their arrival. The staff had adjusted to the change in their employer, though some still whispered about the unlikely relationship between the fearsome CEO and the quiet housekeeper. Mrs. Collins, ever the romantic, declared it was just like a movie, while Henderson maintained a dignified silence on matter. One evening, as Griffin and Zariah sat in the garden watching Lena chase fireflies across the lawn, he broached a subject that had been on his mind. I've been thinking, he began, his voice careful. The East Wing staff quarters are pretty small for the 2 of you. Zariah nodded absently. We've managed in smaller spaces. It's actually quite comfortable. Still, Griffin continued, there's so much unused space in the main house. The entire West Wing is empty except when I have business guests, which is rare. Zariah turned to look at him, sensing where this was heading. Griffin, I'm not asking you to move into my bedroom, he clarified quickly. Though I wouldn't object if you wanted to. I'm suggesting you and Lena might be more comfortable in the West Wing suite. It has 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, and its own small kitchen. And it's closer to your rooms, Zariah noted with a small smile. That's just a convenient bonus, Griffin admitted, returning her smile. But mostly, I thought, it might feel less like your staff and more like your family. The word hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Family. Something Griffin had lost when Wyatt died. Something Zariah and Lena had never truly had. It's a big step, Zariah said softly. I know, and you can take all the time you need to think about it. Griffin took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them. No pressure. Zariah looked at Lena, who had captured a firefly and was watching it crawl across her palm with fascination. The little girl had blossomed in recent weeks, talking more, smiling more, drawing pictures of the 3 of them together. I don't need time, Zariah decided. We'd love to move to the West Wing. Griffin's face lit up. Really? Zariah squeezed his hand. But I'm still keeping my job. I don't want to be kept, Griffin. I want to contribute. I wouldn't have it any other way, he assured her. Though I'm thinking we might need to adjust your job description. Housekeeper doesn't seem quite right anymore. How about partner? Zariah suggested. Griffin's smile widened. I like the sound of that. The next day, they began moving Zariah and Lena's belongings to the West Wing suite. It wasn't a long process. They had few possessions, but it felt momentous. As Griffin carried a box of Lena's books into her new room, he paused to watch Zariah arranging clothes in the closet. What? She asked, noticing his gaze. Nothing. Just happy. The simple admission made Zariah's heart swell. They had both been through so much pain, had both built such high walls around themselves. Yet somehow, they had found their way to each other, to this moment of quiet contentment. That evening, Griffin had to attend a business dinner he couldn't reschedule. He left reluctantly, promising to return as early as possible. I've told security to be extra vigilant, he assured Zariah at the door. And I'm only a phone call away if anything happens. We'll be fine, Zariah said, touched by his concern. It's just one evening. Griffin kissed her goodbye, then knelt to give Lena a hug. Be good for your mom, okay? I'm always good, Lena replied seriously. Griffin laughed. That's true. You're the best. After he left, Zariah and Lena enjoyed a quiet evening in their new rooms. The space was luxurious compared to anywhere they had lived before, with plush carpets, elegant furniture, and large windows overlooking the gardens. Do you like our new rooms? Zariah asked as she helped Lena get ready for bed. Lena nodded enthusiastically. It's like a princess castle. It is pretty fancy, Zariah agreed, smiling at her daughter's assessment. Is Griffin going to be my new daddy? Lena asked suddenly. The question caught Zariah off guard. Why do you ask that, sweetie? Because we live in his house now, and he looks at you like the daddies look at mommies in my books. And he helps me with homework like Jenny's daddy does. Out of the mouths of babes, Zariah thought. Leave it to a 6-year-old to cut straight to the heart of the matter. Griffin cares about us very much, she said carefully. And we care about him. But these things take time, Lena. I want him to be my daddy, Lena declared with the simple certainty of childhood. He never yells or makes you cry. No, he doesn't, Zariah agreed, her throat tight with emotion. After tucking Lena in, Zariah wandered through their new suite, still marveling at the turn their lives had taken. 6 months ago, she had been working 2 jobs to make ends meet, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid. Now she was living in a mansion with a man who treated her with respect and adoration, who looked at her daughter with love instead of indifference. It seemed too good to be true, and in Zariah's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. She pushed the negative thought away. Griffin wasn't Marcus. He had shown her consistently and patiently that he was a man who could be trusted, a man who had faced his own demons and emerged stronger, kinder. Zariah was so lost in thought that at first, she didn't hear the soft knock at the suite's main door. When it came again, louder, she went to answer it, expecting Henderson with a message from Griffin. Instead, she found herself face to face with Marcus. For a moment, Zariah couldn't breathe. Marcus looked the same, handsome in a calculated way, with the charming smile that had once made her heart race and later made her blood run cold. Hello, Z, he said softly. Aren't you going to invite me in? Zariah's mind raced. How had he gotten past security? Where were the guards Griffin had hired? What are you doing here? She demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. There's a restraining order. A piece of paper, Marcus dismissed with a wave of his hand. Not much protection when you really think about it. His eyes moved past her, taking in the luxurious suite. Well, you've certainly moved up in the world. You need to leave, Zariah said firmly, blocking the doorway. Now, not without seeing my daughter. Marcus's smile faded, his true nature showing through the charming facade. I have rights, Zariah. Legal rights. Rights you gave up when you disappeared for nearly a year, Zariah countered. When you chose drugs and other women over your own child. Marcus's expression darkened. Always so judgmental. People make mistakes, Z. I've changed. It was the same line, the same manipulation tactic he had always used. Once it might have worked. Once she might have wavered. might have given him another chance to prove himself. But not anymore. If you've changed, you'll respect the legal order to stay away from us, Zoraya said coolly. You'll go through the courts if you want visitation. And let your rich boyfriend's lawyers drag my name through the mud? I don't think so. Marcus took a step forward. I just want 5 minutes with Lena. That's all. Zoraya stood her ground. No. The single word seemed to flip a switch in Marcus. His face contorted with rage, the mask of reasonableness falling away completely. You don't get to say no to me, he snarled, pushing forward. Zoraya tried to close the door, but Marcus shoved it open, sending her stumbling backward. He entered the suite and closed the door behind him. Where is she? He demanded. Lena, it's Daddy. Panic surged through Zoraya. She reached for her phone, but Marcus was faster, grabbing her wrist. Who are you calling? Your boyfriend? He sneered. He's not here to protect you now, is he? Let go of me, Zoraya said, struggling to keep her voice calm despite her racing heart. You're hurting me. Hurting you. Marcus tightened his grip. I haven't even started. Mommy. Both adults turned to see Lena standing in the bedroom doorway, her eyes wide with fear. Lena, go back to your room, Zoraya ordered. Now. But Marcus released Zoraya's wrist and moved toward Lena. There's my girl. Look how big you've gotten. Lena backed away, her small face solemn and afraid. You're not supposed to be here. Of course I am. I'm your daddy. Marcus knelt, extending his hand. Don't you remember me? I remember, Lena said quietly. You made Mommy cry. Marcus's false smile faltered. That was a misunderstanding, sweetheart. Grown-ups sometimes have arguments, but it doesn't mean they don't love each other. You don't love us, Lena stated with the brutal honesty of a child. You hurt us. Anger flashed across Marcus's face. Your mother's been poisoning you against me. I'm your father. You're supposed to love me. Marcus, that's enough, Zoraya said, stepping between him and Lena. You need to leave. Now. I'm not going anywhere without my daughter, Marcus declared, his voice rising. You've turned her against me, and now you're playing house with some rich guy. Did you tell him what a terrible wife you were? How nothing was ever good enough for you? The familiar gaslighting tactics washed over Zoraya, but this time, they didn't sink in. This time, she recognized them for what they were, desperate attempts to regain control. We were never married. Marcus, she reminded him calmly. And I was never the problem. You were. Marcus's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful bitch. I think that's quite enough. Griffin's voice cut through the room like ice. He stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. Behind him were 2 security guards and Henderson, who must have alerted him when Marcus somehow gained entry to the estate. Who the hell are you? Marcus demanded, though the answer was obvious. I'm Griffin Maddox. This is my home, and you're trespassing. Griffin's voice was controlled, but Zoraya could see the fury simmering beneath the surface, not to mention violating a restraining order. Marcus laughed, a bitter sound. Of course. The knight in shining armor arrives just in time. I'm giving you one chance to leave peacefully, Griffin said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The police are already on their way. You can't keep me from my daughter, Marcus insisted, but Zoraya could see the calculation in his eyes. He was outnumbered, cornered. Actually, I can, Griffin replied. The restraining order you're currently violating will be amended to include criminal trespass charges. My security footage shows you breaking into a private residence, and there are 3 witnesses to your verbal abuse. Marcus's confidence wavered. You think your money can buy everything? Even my daughter? No one is buying anyone, Griffin said evenly. But a man who abandons a child for a year, then breaks into a house to see her against her will, isn't likely to impress a family court judge. Sirens sounded in the distance, growing closer. Marcus's shoulders slumped slightly, the fight going out of him. This isn't over, he said, but the threat sounded hollow. Yes, it is, Griffin replied. For your sake, I hope you never come near them again. The security guards moved forward to escort Marcus out. As they passed Griffin, Marcus paused. She'll use you, he said spitefully, just like she used me. And when she's taken everything she can, she'll leave. Griffin didn't dignify the accusation with a response. He simply watched as the guards led Marcus away, his expression impassive until they were out of sight. Then he rushed to Zariah and Lena, gathering them both in his arms. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently. "Did he hurt you?" "We're okay," Zariah assured him, though her wrist ached where Marcus had grabbed her. "How did you know?" "Henderson called me." The security system detected someone climbing the garden wall, but by the time the guards realized what was happening, he was already inside. Griffin's face was grim. "I'm so sorry, Zariah. I thought you were safe here." "We are safe," she insisted. "You came." Griffin knelt to Lena's level. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Lena nodded solemnly. "He was mad like before, but you made him stop." "I'll always make it stop," Griffin promised, his voice thick with emotion. "No one will ever hurt you or your mom again." The police arrived moments later. The next few hours were a blur of statements and questions. Griffin stayed by their side throughout, his steady presence a comfort as they recounted what had happened. When the officers finally left, taking Marcus into custody for violating the restraining order and trespassing, exhaustion hit Zariah like a physical force. "You should rest," Griffin said gently. "Both of you. It's been a hell of a night. Will you stay?" Lena asked, her small voice uncertain. "In case he comes back." Griffin glanced at Zariah, a question in his eyes. She nodded. "I'll stay," he promised. "I'm not going anywhere." Later, after Lena had finally fallen asleep in her new bedroom, Zariah and Griffin sat in the suite's living room, talking in low voices. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't come when you did," Zariah said, shivering despite the warmth of the room. Griffin took her hand. "But I did come, and I always will." "I know." Zariah looked down at their joined hands. "For the first time in my life, I actually believe that." "Good." Griffin's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "Because I'm not going anywhere, Zariah. Not unless you ask me to." She met his eyes. "I won't ask you to." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, a promise as binding as any vow. "Move in with me," Griffin said suddenly. "Not just to the West Wing. To my rooms. Let's make this real. All the way." Zariah's heart raced. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "Not marriage. Not yet." Griffin's lips quirked in a small smile. "Though I'm not ruling it out for the future. But yes, I'm asking you to share my life. Officially. Completely." The old Zariah would have hesitated, would have looked for the catch, the hidden agenda. But this woman, the one who had stood up to Marcus, who had built a new life for herself and her daughter, who had learned to trust again, this woman didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to all of it." Griffin's smile was radiant. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." Zariah's breath caught. Despite his words about not proposing yet, she half expected to see a ring. Instead, Griffin emptied the pouch into his palm to reveal a delicate silver bracelet, clearly sized for a child's wrist. "It's for Lena," he explained. "I had it made specially." Zariah took the bracelet, examining it in the soft lamplight. Engraved on the slender band were the words, "You saw me first." Tears filled her eyes as she remembered that first day, when Lena had walked into Griffin's library and gently wiped away his tears. The moment that had changed everything. "It's perfect," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "She'll love it." "I thought we could give it to her together," Griffin suggested. "Tomorrow morning. A new beginning for all of us." Zariah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Griffin pulled her into his arms, holding her close as the last of the tension from the evening's events drained away. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the traumatic events of the previous night seeming almost like a bad dream. Zariah woke to find Griffin already up, making coffee in the sweet small kitchen. "Good morning," he greeted her with a kiss. "Lena's still asleep. I checked a few minutes ago." She was exhausted, Zariah said, accepting the coffee cup he offered. "We all were." Griffin nodded, his expression growing serious. "I spoke with my lawyer this morning. Marcus is still in custody, but he'll probably be released today on bail. The restraining order violation should keep him away, but we should be prepared," Zariah finished. "Exactly. I've doubled security at the gates. And I think Lena should stay home from school for a few days. just until we're sure he's not going to try anything else. Zariah sighed. I hate that she has to live this way, always looking over our shoulders. It won't be forever, Griffin promised. Once the legal system processes everything, once he realizes we're serious about pressing charges, he'll back off. I hope you're right. They were interrupted by the sound of small feet padding across the carpet. Lena appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair tousled from sleep, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched in one arm. Good morning, sunshine, Zariah said, opening her arms for a hug. Did you sleep okay? Lena nodded, leaning into her mother's embrace. I had dreams about the bad man, but then Griffin came in my dreams too and made him go away. Griffin and Zariah exchanged glances over the top of Lena's head. Even in sleep, the child's perceptiveness was remarkable. I have something for you, Griffin said, kneeling beside them. He took the velvet pouch from his pocket and handed it to Lena. A present. Lena's eyes widened as she opened the pouch and pulled out the bracelet. Pretty. It's a special bracelet, Griffin explained, helping her slip it onto her wrist. See what it says? Lena examined the engraving, her lips moving silently as she read the words. You saw me first. She looked up at Griffin, her brow furrowed. What does it mean? Griffin glanced at Zariah, who nodded encouragingly. It means that when I was sad, when I thought no one could see the real me, you did. You saw me, Lena, and that changed everything. Understanding dawned on the child's face. When you were crying in the library? Yes. Griffin's voice was husky with emotion. That day, you taught me that it's okay to be sad sometimes. That being strong doesn't mean hiding your feelings. Lena studied the bracelet again, then looked up with one of her rare, brilliant smiles. I love it. Thank you. You're welcome, sweetheart. Zariah watched the exchange with tears in her eyes. The bond between Griffin and Lena was something special, something pure. Despite all of Marcus's claims about his rights as a biological father, he had never once looked at Lena the way Griffin did now, with unconditional love and genuine interest in who she was as a person. They spent the day together, a quiet family day inside the mansion. Griffin canceled all his meetings, prioritizing Zariah and Lena's sense of security after the previous night's scare. They played board games, watched movies, and baked cookies with Mrs. Collins, who doted on Lena as if she were her own grandchild. That evening, they sat in the garden, Lena drawing in her sketchbook between them. The bracelet glinted on her small wrist as she worked, a constant reminder of the bond they had formed. Griffin reached over to hand Zariah a glass of wine, their fingers brushing in a casual intimacy that still gave her a thrill. Happy? He asked softly. Very, she replied, meaning it completely. Zariah looked at her daughter, head bent in concentration over her drawing, and at Griffin, his face relaxed and content in the golden evening light. This was what family felt like, she realized. Not the toxic, manipulative relationship she had endured with Marcus, but this safety, respect, love. Lena suddenly looked up from her drawing, her expression serious. Mommy, are you going to tell him? Zariah froze. Tell him what, sweetie? A chill ran through her. Had Lena overheard something about Marcus being released? About some new threat they had tried to shield her from? Griffin looked confused. Is everything okay? Lena's solemn eyes fixed on Griffin. That my real dad's coming back. The words hung in the air, devastating in their implications. Had Marcus contacted Lena somehow? Had he made promises to her behind their backs? What do you mean, Lena? Zariah asked carefully. When did you talk to your father? Lena shook her head, looking confused by their reactions. Not that dad. My real dad. Griffin and Zariah exchanged bewildered glances. I don't understand, sweetie, Zariah said gently. What real dad? Lena sighed with the exaggerated patience of a child, explaining something obvious to adults. Griffin is my real dad now. In my heart. She touched her chest solemnly. But you said he's going back to his office tomorrow. So he's coming back here after, right? Relief flooded through Zariah, followed quickly by a wave of emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. Beside her, Griffin seemed frozen, his expression a mixture of shock and joy. Yes, baby, Zariah managed to say past the lump in her throat. Griffin is coming back. He'll always come back to us. Satisfied with this answer, Lena returned to her drawing, unaware of the profound impact her words had had on the adults. Griffin reached for Zariah's hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "She called me her real dad." "I heard," Zariah whispered back, squeezing his hand. "And she's right. You are." The peace they had built together still felt fragile in some ways. Marcus remained a shadow on the periphery of their lives. The business world still sometimes whispered about the unlikely relationship between Griffin Maddox and his former housekeeper. There would be challenges ahead, adjustments to make as they forged this new family. But in that moment, sitting in the garden with the two people he loved most in the world, Griffin knew with absolute certainty that the storm that had raged inside him for so long had finally broken. In its place was something he had never expected to find, a quiet joy, a sense of belonging, a family of his own. And it had all begun with a silent child who had seen his tears and, instead of running away, had reached out to wipe them dry. "You saw me first," Griffin murmured, repeating the words engraved on Lena's bracelet. "And we see you now," Zariah replied softly. "All of you, the real you." As the sun set over the garden, casting long shadows across the lawn, the three of them sat together in comfortable silence, bound by love, by choice, by the family they had built from broken pieces. The storm had passed, and in its wake, they had found something more powerful than any tempest, the quiet strength of love.